right, why did Democrats do so well? In many ways, young voters. 70% of young voters voted blue last night. These are the stats here, folks. Look at the numbers right here. The youth vote in share the battleground states. Arizona, 76%. Florida was 58. Georgia was 63. Michigan, 58. Nevada, 63. New Hampshire, 74. North Carolina, 52. Ohio, 62. Pennsylvania, 70. Texas, 65. Wisconsin, 71. But look at the youth share of the vote. You see there, folks. Now look at the numbers for Republicans. Only one place for Republicans. They were over. So North Carolina was 44%. Michigan was 41. Florida was 40. The lowest was in Arizona. It was at 20%. And look at the share of the vote. Again, Texas, it was 15%. And then, of course, you had 14% in North Carolina. And then you had 12 and 11. And so, again, when you start talking about turnout numbers, that's a huge difference maker. And we wanted to talk about that. So exit polling data all across the country is important. And remember, a lot of these states, they have same-day registration. That's what happened in many of these places. So young folks were showing up. There were huge numbers on college campuses as well. And folks, according to the National Election Poll, which includes a consortium of news outlets and the Edison Research Group, they found that younger voters aged 18 to 29 were the only voter group by age to overwhelmingly support Democrats in the midterms. Joining me right now is Tiffany Lofton, a National Labor and Education Organizers, Evan Wayne Malbrough, Andrew Gutman Foundation Board Member and ACLU of Georgia Fellow, and Harris County, Texas Democratic Party Chair, Otis Avaguru. Glad to have all three of you here. The thing that, Tiffany, you mentioned this last night when you said there were 8 million new young voters who came onto the register polls, on voting rolls since last year, and that number is going to be increasing. This is where, if you're Democrats, you're looking at those numbers, you better be saying to that 18, 29, 29, 35, what do you care about? How do we deliver? Because when you're seeing 70%, you look at the breakdown in those states, you keep that up and they keep adding folks, bottom line is that's the pathway to victory in the future.
Roland, we have to look at that voting demographic of the 8 million young people who are now new registered voters, eligible voters since the last midterm election. We got to break that down even more by state, like you said. And then, because this is a Black network, we got to talk about the impacts of race in that demographic. From those 18 to 29-year-olds, Roland, Black voters from 18 to 29 make up 89% of those leaning Democrat. You got it on the screen. Look at y'all, viewers. I'm not talking to the panel. Viewers, look at the Black folks on this chart. Black folks from 18 to 29, 89% of them are leaning blue. 9% are leaning red. So when we talk about young people in those states, it's not just the infrastructure dollars to how do we turn out more young people. You have to continue not to target, because we're clearly turning out. You have to figure out, when I get elected, when we are in office, how are we continuing to make these voters happy? Because, surprise, in 2024, we're going to have another couple million young people coming on so that they can vote in the presidential election. And if you know that your devoted, promised demographic of folks are people of color, then the question does not become, we got to make sure we turn out people of color, and the advertisements got to make sure we reach out to give them the right messaging. We clearly don't need that. What we need is for you to make do on your promise when you say you're going to get into office, cancel that student loan debt, women's reproductive choice, gun violence prevention, defunding the police, environmental justice, good jobs, lowering the rent for our pay. We're not putting you in the office because it's cute to be blue. We're putting you in office because you said you was going to do what you said you was going to do. So to continue to make us happy, do that. Young people, yes. People of color, even more so. Those white folks who are those young people, they're almost half and half, Roland. 58% of the white folks is leaning Democrat, but 40% of them are leaning Republican. So we got to figure out how we continue to make the voting bloc happy so that they can continue, we can continue to do the work that we've been doing to mobilize and bring our folks to the polls, which we've already been doing.
And Otis, again, when we start talking about messaging, we talk about delivering. At the end of the day, that's what folks want to see. Are you delivering? And look, there was a lot of pressure on President Joe Biden to deal with the issue of marijuana, a lot of pressure on student debt relief. He didn't want to do that. And it was that pressure, and basically young voters. You know, I go back to 2010 when President Obama kept talking about let's get rid of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and LGBTQ folks were like, yo, man, we want this thing done. So what they did was, and he kept all up to Congress. They finally said, you know what? They closed their checkbooks. They got a shellacking in 2010. The next damn month, Congress actually got rid of it, and then they opened the checkbooks up. They basically said, we ain't playing. Young voters were basically telling Biden, you don't do this, we ain't showing up in November. He was forced to take those actions, and that's why they responded. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Roland, and thank you for having me on this show. It's been a long night here in Harris County, a long day last night, so I'm honored to be here. Yeah, absolutely. Young people didn't show up because they love Joe Biden. What they did was they showed up because our president, Congress, finally invested in our lives, and we finally felt seen and heard as young people. And if you want to see the same results, you have to keep doing that. You have to keep delivering on your promises. That's what's going to get young people out there. And the other thing that I also want to put out there as well, too, is that for young people, people like myself, relating to us is very important. Not just a positional standpoint, not just using your title to say, hey, look, I've done it, I've been there, I'm the president, I'm the deacon, I'm the CEO, but relate to me, use our pop culture. One of the things that I thought was very interesting is that you see our Gen Z leaders using TikTok, using Snapchat, using what's available to them to reach other people in their influence as a circle. And then you saw Joe Biden getting on TikTok. You saw Congress people getting on TikTok. You were engaging people where they're at. One of the phrases I cannot stand the most is meeting people where you're at. I can meet you at McDonald's. I can meet you at Walmart. I can meet you at H-E-B down here in Texas. What you need to be doing is engaging me in these areas to make sure that I'm out there supporting the causes you're doing. So you've got to keep delivering on your promises to make sure young people are out to vote and making sure that we're staying voting. And then also the one thing that young people love to do is we love to play the game of telephone and the whisper campaign. We're going to tell our friends to go vote who are our ages because we know that you're delivering. And then when we're asking you and they're telling us, hey, well, my vote doesn't matter, here's what we can point to say, this is why your vote matters. And the forgiveness of student debt is a great starting point. We've got to make sure that we're tackling our climate change efforts. We've got to talk about reproductive rights. We've got to talk about environmental justice, continuing on that. And then we've also got to talk about the basic issues as well, too. Here in Harris County, what we do, we're always talking about a livable wage, the economy. We've got to talk about healthcare because we want to be healthy. We want to stay. We want to make sure that we see the age of 80 because we want to see Social Security, too. And then we've got to talk about education because some of us are going to have kids in the future, and we want to make sure that our kids are properly educated and we're investing in the future. And so those are things that are super important to young people. And when we keep delivering on that, they're going to keep coming out and showing up and voting for Democrats up and down the ballot.
Andrew, what also I think should be happening is, again, if you're young voters and young activists in organizations, now it's kind of like, okay, here's my list. This is what I want to see, because here's the deal now. Republicans are seeing these numbers. First of all, if they don't control the House yet, there's a slim pathway for Democrats to control the House. But if they control the House, they're going to have to contend likely with the Democratic Senate. And so bottom line is they got to negotiate. If I'm Democrats, I'm coming up with an agenda that is appealing to the 1835, and I'm daring Republicans to shut it down and then nail their asses in 2024. Andrew? I'm sorry, Evan. Evan, go ahead. I'm sorry. My bad. I'm so sorry. My bad. I read it wrong. Go ahead.
Apologies. Absolutely. I think that young voters, I think what everybody in the political system needs to learn is that the idea of voting as a political identity, that's over, right? A lot of young people today are really voting for their own interest rather than, oh, I support this party or I support over this party. And they're really looking at the policies. If you look at a lot of young people with the advent of social media, with the push for young people to educate themselves, they're looking at the entire system, the entire ecosystems they live in, from economics to politics to the policies that come out of them coming together, and they're saying, this is what we want. So what we're seeing now is a prime time for young people to establish themselves as a constituency. And I think that's what we're going to see over the next few elections. How do we organize? How do we engage with the elected officials that are not just only our age, because we have our first Gen Z member in Congress, but also those that are older? The millennial generation and the Gen Z generation are poised to be the largest voter bloc. And what we're starting to see is they support things like a person's right to choose. They support LGBTQ rights. They support social services. And now the political system has to contend with that. And it's my hope, especially as a person who lives in Georgia and has always worked in Georgia, my hope is that we are starting to see the idea that young people don't vote and young people don't participate in the rear view. And we're starting to really see this new constituency come up and say, hey, we have stake in our communities. We hold the keys to both Washington and the state houses. And if you want to get access to these areas, you need to come to us.
Rebecca, you were actually shaking your head when he said, look, they're not self-identifying, which means you can't, and we talked about that, you can't use the same playbook, and I keep saying the same thing for young black voters. They're not self-identifying like their grandparents and parents.
Right. What's really interesting is that when we look, especially at Generation Z versus the millennials, I know we had an argument last night of who is a millennial, who isn't a millennial. And when I think about Generation Z, they've watched millennials fight, take the streets, but they've also watched our elected officials not respond and do anything. And Generation Z is saying, you know what? If you're not going to do anything, we're going to do something about it. So I was thinking back to 2016 when I actually hired a young Max Frost to do some organizing in Florida. And then to see him now, that's a great example of, hey, I sat back, I worked for other people, I watched y'all, I asked and I begged on different issues. You all didn't do anything about it, so guess what? We're coming now. We're going to do something about it. So it's going to be really interesting watching Max Frost and the future Max Frost when they take power and what it is that they're going to do to move this country forward.
Questions for our young voter panel from the other panelists. Congo, what you got?
Well, first of all, thank all three of you for the work that you're doing. And Tiffany, quite honestly, last night, we were giving you so many amens and just everything you were saying on the panel. Just thanks for bringing that fire. The question I have is for you. I'm assuming that part of the reason that many of our young people are out there getting out to vote is because there's been more engagement from those within the hip-hop community. And given your work with the Hip-Hop Caucus and all of the work you've been doing before, can you speak to that? Because we always hear so much negativity about those in the hip-hop world aren't doing enough, they don't care. What are you seeing?
I mean, thank you for the question. I don't know if everybody else knows this, but he used to be my hot Pilates teacher, so it's good to be on a panel with you, brother.
We missed you.
Literally, that's how I know him. So let me say this. The panelists and my co-panelists have talked about how politics have become more personal and how we are not talking about political party affiliation. What we've been seeing is our influencers, Black celebrities, whether they be hip hop artists, whether they be, Ryan Coogler, the director, or whatever it might be, their stories of Blackness and experiencing anti-Blackness have been coming to the forefront of the last couple of years on all social media platforms. And we feel more connected to our leaders, to our influencers, to our cultural trendsetters. Because of the issues that they are facing, they are making politics a part of their daily lives too. So when we see Ryan Coogler at Bank of America or whatever bank it was, I forgot the bank that it was, but he was getting stopped because he was asking to take out a lot of money, and he wrote it on a little note card, and they called the police on him. we resonate with that story, right? When we see Oprah Winfrey getting hassled because they don't know who she is and she's trying to spend a lot of money to buy a purse and she shares that story, we're starting to resonate. Well, listen, you thought you was above blackness, but you just as black as we are. When we see Meg the Stallion go through gun violence and the students are talking about gun violence and how mass school shootings are happening across the country, politics are becoming more personal. So hip hop, by nature of that, which has always been the trend to set the culture of what America, I think, talks about, those political experiences come out in hip hop, and the audience, the viewers, the subscribers, they understand and make the connection. Hip hop is not separate from the experience that we are having every single day as Black folks. It is the echo chamber of what that is. And Aja Monet, who I will channel in this moment, who I adore and love as a poet and an artist, says all the time that artists are the gatekeepers of what happens politically because they're able to express the experience and make sure that we all know that we are not alone. Those very specific instances help set the culture and the agenda politically. And voters, who they are also not separate from that experience, and voters are a part of that conversation and will help determine what we do next, now and between now and the next presidential election, and then therefore.
Larry, what you got?
Yeah, Roland. I mean, we talked about this segment and the power of young voters, and this is a question to any of the folks who are on the panel. What do you think is maybe one or two issues that between now and 2024 that you're coming to, whether you're talking about the federal level, Biden administration, or state level, wherever you guys are located, and saying this is the issue. Both these issues we need to make sure happen between now and in the next 2 to 4 years. What do you think that one or two issues are in particular?
I can start with that response. I think the biggest issue, for many young people is economic mobility, right? You're looking at a generation who is slated to make less, own less, and produce less than their parents, even though they have job security, they're not able to move up socially. And a lot of them are living on the fringes. And we're not just talking about people who aren't college educated. We're talking about college educated people too, when you add in that compounding factor is student loans. So I think the biggest issue, or what young people really want to see to actually buy in is, all right, I'm at the age where I'm adulting, where I have to take care of myself. I'm at that age too. Rent is high, right? Gas is high. I have to, think about saving. I have to think about healthcare. So I want to be sure that I'll have fair wages. I want to be sure that I'll have fair prices independent of corporate gouging. So I think any way that the federal government and any party can really bring those solutions, I think that's going to resonate with a lot of young voters, because that's what voters wake up with every day, right? I get a notification of how much money's in my account or how much money is taken out of my account every morning, right? So, anybody who can come and affect that in a positive manner, that would help me and a lot of other young voters come out and support that candidate.
Olders, I think you probably get a kick out of this. Y'all go to my iPad. This is a prominent conservative. Raise the voting age to 21, boy. They mad as hell.
They mad as hell. Hell no. They mad.
Roland, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I actually respond to that? Because I think that also speaks to a bigger issue in our system. And at the ACLU, we talk about this a lot. Access, right? The name of the game in this election and then upcoming elections, especially in Georgia for the runoff, is access. And what you've been seeing is, in response to 2020, there's been a concerted effort by political leaders to stop access, right? I was on the ground in Georgia, in one of the large metro Atlanta counties, dealing with people who lost access that was available 2 years ago. If you look at mail-in ballots in Georgia, that was curbed. Even if you look at people who were actually gotten absentee ballots, there were counties that neglected to actually send them absentee ballots. And I can tell you personally, that personally affected people's ability to vote because they didn't have the time to actually go to the poll. So what that tweet is indicative of is that instead of policies that actually court voters, what you're starting to see is people are saying, well, we want to choose our voters and we want to stop that access. Because honestly, I'm the exact opposite of that tweet. I believe if you're old enough to work in the United States, which is in most cases 16, you should be able to vote. If money's being taken out of your check, you should be able to vote. So what we really need to be talking about is the key to these races is one, policies, but it's also access. When you see bills like SB 202, they have an effect because people have lives and voting is a part of that. So when you restrict those windows, that's when you get the voter suppression and that's when you get the disengagement, disillusionment with the system itself.
What's your name, Andrew?
I'm Evan.
Evan. He's an Andrew Goodman Foundation fellow. So that's why I saw it. It was like way too many damn. His title too damn long.
Well, look, I'm living. I work in the legacy of Andrew Goodman, a voting rights activist that lost his life, in the Mississippi burning incident. So if you want to call me Andrew, I'll take it as a compliment.
Evan, first of all, you're a gangster. I agree with everything you just said. Actually, here in Culver City in Los Angeles, that was on the ballot yesterday. I don't know the results just yet, but reducing the age to 16 for people who are able to vote was on the ballot in Culver City. Roland, I want to answer the question very quickly that the brother asked about what issues are going to be important to young people between now and 2024. Let me say this up front. The young people of today will not be the same young people in 2024. We've got 2 more years where young folks are going to be emerging from all over the place across this country. And those folks are, I think, projecting, caring about 2 different things. One, I don't like giving Joe Biden credit for things he did not do. He said on August 24th that he had a plan to roll out to cancel student loan debt and cut the cost of repayments in half. He also said that January 1st of 2023, which is coming up in less than 2 months, that people are going to have to start repaying their student loans back if they did not get it canceled. Now, currently, as it stands, I believe we have three, I thought there were 4, but there were 3 lawsuits that have paused student loan debt cancellation by the Department of Education. We have not moved, and people's debt has not been canceled. So until that happens, student loan debt is still on pause, and January 1st, we are coming up very closely on the deadline. Folks will have to start to repay their student loans. Student loans have not been canceled yet. There was a lot of confusion on social media and in the news that somebody said Joe Biden was going to be passing out checks. Black folks, we are not getting checks for student loan debt cancellation. The Department of Education is talking to your lender directly. They will not go through you. You will not get a check. You will not get money. They will go to the lender directly, and you will get an email confirmation that your student loan debt was canceled. But Roland, that announcement does not impact upcoming voters who are going to be voting in 2024. If you did not get your loans dispersed by June of this year, you don't qualify for that cancellation announcement that Joe Biden made. So there are going to be graduates who are coming up, they're going to be high school graduates who are going to college who do not have access to student loan debt cancellation unless it's the public student loan forgiveness program, which doesn't have a high success rate. But this announcement that he just made does not impact those new voters. So they're going to care about the cost of education, which has gone up 130% in the last 30 years. Last 2 years of the pandemic, folks had to pay full cost of tuition. They didn't get relief when they were in college. They didn't get reimbursements for the cost of education living on campus, for paying for food and housing. They had to pay that, and they didn't get to experience it. So these young people, if they do go to college, if they decide that's what they want to do for their career path, they're not going to benefit off of that. And the cost of education and the value of education, I think, is going to be one of the top priority issues, in addition to inflation that Brother Evans talked about, a.k.a. Andrew.
Monique.
I have an A and B question for
Hey,
Tiffany D. Lofton. Hey, Tiff.
Hey, sis.
So first, on the chart,
y'all being real black.
on the
Y'all being real black, like real damn black.
so black.
Roland, when you have Ida B. Wells and Harry Belafonte and James Baldwin in the back, you don't get to make fun of us for being this black on the show.
Yeah.
Hey, Monique. Hey, Tiffany. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
So on the chart, what the 1% that's by the 18 to 29 group, I don't know if they can put it back up. I'm wondering if that's 1% of what number, of what group, and how many people that is for a black 18 to 29.
The document that, not the document, the chart that I'm looking at. So Circles, ironically enough, Circles earlier today put out a graph and then they took it down and they had to fix it. And I think this is why, because the 1% doesn't match the graph that I'm looking at. Put the graph up one more time, y'all. I feel like Roland. I'm like, put the graph up. Thank you, team. Yeah, 18 to 29-year-olds, 89% and the 9%. Monique, I don't know what that 1% means because it doesn't match the graph that we see.
I'm guessing that's out of the total of voters. If I'm just trying to do the math on all that, on all of the categories. But the reason why I asked the question is because I am wondering for voters in that age range, who are their natural alliances, coalitions, partners who they can pair with if they are small in number, though growing, larger numbers are coming into the voting population. It seems to me that in order for the things that age group really care about to come to the forefront, they need partners that have more power. What alliances are you all currently involved in, and in what ways can those of us who are not in that group help?
That's a great question. I'm not in that group. I'm considered not a young person. I'm 33. So
you're a young person leader, though.
I am.
You lead the young people. Yes.
No, absolutely. But I wonder if the other two gentlemen on the panel haven't answered that before I jump in, because as I understand it, those folks under the age of 29.
Okay, Tiffany,
they have to form an alliance.
Tiffany, why don't you just answer first? We're gonna go to them too. So go ahead, go.
I don't know if I have an answer for that, because as a 33-year-old person, I know my alliances. I mean, I don't know, Monique, if you saw the show last night, I didn't have too many alliances with the black woman that was on the panel last night about women's reproductive choice. So I don't even know if I got the right answer. That was I didn't have no alliances. Dr. Carr had my back, but other than that, I wonder what Evan and Andrew think.
Otis?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of coalitions that we can draw from, particularly young. And I actually think to answer your question, I think we have to start younger too, start in high school. Here in Texas, that's what we're all about, particularly here in Houston, starting in high school with those coalitions. We like to talk about the Brown and Black Coalition down here in Houston. I'm sure in other places as well too. We like to think about coalitions that are on your college campuses, whether we have I know we have Black Lives Matter chapter in the University of Houston, Texas Southern here in Houston, and I always make things very local because it's so important to me. And then also talking about LGBTQIA rights and those folks, Stonewall, getting involved in those young coalitions as well too. So there's a myriad of coalitions to really get plugged in, but I think before you start getting into coalitions, we need to identify the age range and where we're starting, because here, like in Texas, we always struggle with building a bench. And that coalition is super important to start young and early in high school, and then making your way through college, or whether you're going to community college or you're going through trade school or whatever you're going to do post high school life, getting plugged in with those coalitions and starting off there in that high school range is really important for us. So there's a myriad of coalitions to start off in, and you just got to pick which one you want.
That's
Evan?
a good answer.
Yeah, I can add. I think there's two types of things that bring coalitions together. I think the first one and the strongest one is direct service, right? Coalitions that are working on direct actions in the community where voting is just an aspect. Two examples of that, I would say reproductive care providers. Those are great places to build coalitions because the laws affect their ability to serve that community. That's a service. So instead of voting for an idea, instead of voting for a promise, you're voting for a service that you believe your community needs. And another example of that is union. If you look at union numbers, our generation is creating a resurgence in people who have union membership, right? And those are coalitions as well. And as they did it in the old days, those will help decide elections as well. So I think unions are a great focal point for that. And then I think another part, especially for Black voters and Black young people, Greek life fraternities and sororities, right? You know, I graduated from Georgia State University in 2020, and part of a big supporter of my voting rights work was Greek life, right? You know, they helped corral the communities. They were with me on National Voter Registration Day, hosting voting rights tables, and they still are there today. So I think those communities and those coalitions are what we need to be focusing on and what we need to be putting resources in, because they have shown that they have pull with their communities.
I mean, that went to, can I do my follow-up question? Thank you. So
I got another damn guest, and I'm trying to go home and get some. I'm trying to go home and get some sleep. Girl, hurry up.
My follow-up question was this, because what we talk a lot about student loan debt cancellation. One of the goals of the administration, which I agree with, is to ensure that people who do not choose a higher education path have good jobs that pay great wages and salaries. I'm wondering, for your age range, for the 18 to 29 age range, for people who don't care about student loan debt because they're not choosing a college or university path, what are the next most important issues to them that we can be highlighting?
Yeah, I think, I love that question because we talk about equity all the time. And equity is just not about going to college and succeeding in college. There's trade jobs that are out there. I think for me, issues, the three issues to me that transcend every generation because you get older and you have to live that life is the economic issue, and you talked about it, having a livable wage. Here in Texas, it's $7.25. Imagine going to go pay gas and it's $2, $3 a gallon, and you're only making $7.25. The math just doesn't add, correct? And then also healthcare. Healthcare is super important, whether we're talking about maternal mortality or whether you live in Texas, which has the highest uninsured rate in the country. We leave $10 billion on the table. By the way, money that we have paid for. We are led by Republicans who talk about fiscal responsibility here in Texas, and that, my friends, is not fiscally responsible. So insurance is super important. And then education, whether it's higher ed, whether it's trade jobs, or whether you're going to have kids in the future, you want them to be able to go to public schools that are well funded, not charter schools, not private schools, public schools where most of our people are at. You want them to be well funded and making sure that we're spending in those. So the economic issue is always going to be important to us, healthcare, and then making sure that we have schools. And then we have our reproductive right system. And then a huge thing for us, especially as Black folks living in some of these areas. Here in Houston, we have the historic 5th Ward. Roland, I know you're familiar with it. You've been down here a lot of times visiting these areas. We've had issues with cancer clusters. Environmental justice is going to be a leading issue for Black peoples for years to come because it's impacting our communities the most. So we cannot forget about our environment because we want to be living in areas where there's clean air, where we won't have cancer, and our future can be protected by the laws that we pass regarding clean air and the climate.
Thank you.
All right then. Otis, Evan, Tiffany, I certainly appreciate y'all on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
We are in sunny South Dallas. The election is coming up. It's super important that folks know who they are voting for, but more importantly, what they are voting for. Y'all, we got some free shirts and free lunch right over here.
Freedom is our birthright. No matter what we're up against, we're sending a message in Dallas and Texas and in this country. We won't back down. That's what this bus tour is all about.
The housing cost is one of the most capitalized areas that we have found. People who are marginalized, that are brown and Black, we are suffering the most, and I think that we have the biggest vote and the biggest impact in this election.
I'm voting for affordable housing, for sure.
We should not be paying the cost of a utility failure because our elected officials are too proud to say we need help.
I know that we can bring out our people to vote. It's a part of our birthright. Right. It's a part of our heritage, and surely it's a part of our present and part of our future.
That's right. That's what's up. And we won't black down. Forward that message to 5 friends, because in that message, it's got links to how to get registered, how to check your registration status.
Like I said, 2:30 we'll start rendezvousing right here on this street. I am voting to let our voice be heard in the rural communities that, hey, we are people too. There are things that we need.
Free shirts, free food, and lots of power.
We are in Longview, Texas, where Black voters matter, 365.
Whatever type of oppression a white supremacist throws our way, we will not black down. We are in relentless pursuit of liberation of our people.
Freedom is liberation for Black bodies and Black communities to make economic change through political power.
Freedom is choice.
We won't black down.
We won't black down.
We won't black down, y'all.
We won't black down.
We won't black down.
We won't black down.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?